Hello, everybody. The importance of education cannot be denied. It's an idea that goes all the way back to antiquity. Plato's Republic, for example, was hailed by the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau as the most beautiful educational treatise ever written. And why not? It's our children's future that's at stake, the leaders of tomorrow. So what would Hayek say? I'm Scott Nelson with the Austrian Economic Center and Hayek Institute in Vienna, Austria, and this week we're going to take a look at what Hayek has to say about education. Now, much of the material for today's video has been culled from the final chapter of Hayek's monumental 1960 work, The Constitution of Liberty, which I highly recommend you check out if you haven't done so already. So I'm going to run through some of Hayek's arguments in that particular chapter. Hayek begins by saying that there is a need for a general minimum education. There should also be certain common standards of values, although he's quick to add that this should not be pushed too far. He says that compulsory education for those families for whom the cost would be a severe burden should be defrayed out of public funds. But he also adds that compulsory education, or even government-financed education, does not necessarily require educational institutions to be run by the government. Now let's take a step back for a moment. When we talk about education, what are we talking about? Education is the transmission of knowledge, and it's long been a conceit of the Enlightenment that society's ills were rooted either in faulty institutions or in poor education. And if you could just get those two things right, then we could arrive at a perfect society. Now, Hayek points out problems with this notion. For one, he believes that there's a naive overconfidence in what mere communication of knowledge is able to achieve. And this is a very interesting point, because is it reasonable to assume that a more knowledgeable populace will think the same way? Is it possible even that education could lead people to draw conclusions contrary to those held by the educators? And that leads to another question. Who is doing the educating? And we come here to a theme that is not only present in Hayek's discussion of education, but pervades, in fact, his entire work, namely the danger of centralization. Centralized education can be dangerous, especially if it comes to be dominated by a group that believes it has the answers to society's ills. So who is in control of the education system is a chief source of friction. Now, as long as the curriculum and the educators are teaching what you believe in, then there's no problem. But what happens when a new government makes changes that are not to your liking? I should say also parenthetically that for better or for worse, schools are only one source of an individual's education. There's also the family, social circles, and of course, the internet. Now, as we move from elementary education to higher education, some of the prevalent themes are inequality, merit, and chance. So what does Hayek have to say here? Well, first of all, Hayek says that the question of how much education should be provided for all, or how long children should be required to attend school, depends on circumstances, the wealth of the country, the economy, etc. For example, in some countries, university is considered to be a right, while in others it's considered to be a privilege. But Hayek does concede that higher education and research can be subsidized to an extent because the benefits to a community from some of the work done by scientists and scholars cannot be measured by the price at which these people sell particular services, since much of their contribution becomes freely available to all. But how do we know who will make the most profitable contributions? And I quote Hayek here on this problem. Hayek says, "The general problem we are faced with in all higher education, then, is this. By some method, certain young people must be selected at an age when one cannot know with any certainty who will profit most, to be given an education that will enable them to earn a higher income than the rest, and to justify the investment, they must be selected so that, on the whole, they will be qualified to earn a higher income. Finally, we have to accept the fact that since, as a rule, somebody else will have to pay for the education, those who benefit from it will thus be enjoying an unearned advantage. Now that's an uncomfortable quote. There's a great deal of uncertainty as to how we should determine who should benefit from the unearned advantage of higher education. Obviously, fairness is an important criterion. But how is fairness enforced? As far as education at public expense is concerned, the argument for equal treatment of all is strong. So far, so good. Where it becomes trickier for Hayek is when this argument is combined with the argument against permitting special advantages to the more fortunate ones. So in other words, those who were born into wealthier circumstances or enjoy certain privileges. Hayek has a problem with this because it would imply that nothing should be provided that cannot be provided for all. Now for Hayek, this means that government should concern itself only with elementary education, which can be provided equally for all, and leave advanced education in private hands. Obviously, on the other hand, someone may object to all of the aforementioned and say that more should be spent on education in general, which dovetails into another important issue that I won't get into in this video, namely, how is the government spending your money? But fairness isn't the only problem. Connected to this is the problem of inequality. And yet, inequality is baked into education. All human differences create unfair advantages, but education demonstrates inequality more clearly than anything else. After all, the very act of grading, by definition, ranks people into a hierarchy, showing that some are more intelligent or capable than others. Or at least, that some are more capable when it comes to taking tests. And Hayek in his time certainly had his problems with evaluating students on the basis of tests, to which I already alluded in one of my previous videos. But to some extent, the problem might actually have something to do with our merit-based thinking. I'm not suggesting we abandon the notion of merit, but one of the interesting side effects of seeing everything in terms of merit is that we might delude ourselves into thinking that our lot in life is deserved, that others deserve whatever they presently happen to have or not have. We might come to resent such a system that, on the basis of merit, has produced such different outcomes. Strangely, the apparent justice of it all may be more difficult to bear than the injustice of a system that is not based on merit. But at the end of the day, whether you're rich or poor, more educated or less educated, much of that does not depend on merit. Your success, or lack thereof, is still largely a matter of chance. What matters is that you make the best use of the accidents, of the chances that fate places at your doorstep. And that is what Hayek would say.
The outcome for a particular individual is necessarily unpredictable. Now, an outcome which is unpredictable and undesigned by anybody cannot be just. Just as little as the outcome of a game of chance can be a just game. But people resent this. And the people who imagine, oh, it should be possible to design all this, to arrange this, accept the government to do this in a manner that the distribution is just. Now that is literally impossible, because it would require that all this widely dispersed information about particular facts and particular circumstances and particular gifts can be used and controlled by a central authority.
This guy is awesome. He's got a lot of great stuff to say. I hope you've really been enjoying our videos. If you have, and if you'd like to hear what Hayek has to say about something else, anything, then let me know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends.